In this video, we are going to be fishing 20 miles offshore, chasing giant schools of fish in under massive seaweed patches. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So we start our morning with a 20-mile run offshore. On our way out there, we find this giant seaweed patch. And when we make these far run offshore, we always have multiple casters and trolling rods. This reel right here is a Penn Battle. We usually have a couple of these rigged up with 20-pound braid to a pink bucktail jig, and these bucktail jigs work fantastic when you're casting at seaweed patches or floating logs. Now that we have all our lines rigged up, on our way out 20 miles offshore, we found this giant seaweed patch only like 5 miles offshore. So I made a cast out there, and it did not take long for us to get our first bite. I now start fighting this fish, and after this fish, we hit the biggest school of fish I have ever fished. So you guys definitely don't want to miss that. So we now got this fish right near the boat, so my dad grabbed his gaff, and honestly on his first gaff shot here, he didn't have the best shot, but all that mattered is that we were able to put this fish right in the boat. After we got this beautiful mahi in the boat, we decided to continue our run offshore. We now start running offshore, and we ran another 15 miles until we found a bunch of these birds diving. Once we saw these birds diving, we knew we had to drop our trolling lines in the water and start trolling. When we were fishing these massive schools of fish, we were trolling our barjacks lure. What makes this lure so special is it contains 3 little squids, and each one of these squids have their own hook, so you can catch up to 3 fish all at once. So we trolled this lure through these massive schools of fish, and it did not take long for us to get our first bite. So we now just got this really nice hit. So I grabbed my rod and started to fight this fish. And finding massive schools of fish like this offshore is such a fun type of fishing down here in South Florida. It's constant action, and honestly, in these schools of fish, you just never know what you're gonna bring up. So I switched off and gave it to my brother Hunter to let him get some action. So he started fighting these fish, and we were fighting these fish on 20-pound mono. Personally, when you're fighting like 5 to 10-pound fish or just smaller fish, it's so much more fun to fight them on light tackle rather than going so overkill. And it took us about 10 minutes just to get these fish to the boat. And the reasoning for this, even though they're smaller fish, the reason it takes so long is because usually when we're fishing these schools of fish, we put these lines out so far because some of these smaller fish are always just worried to come into that prop wash. So we usually just put the lures so far behind the boat so we don't have to worry about spooking any of these fish. And if you guys can, we do weekly fishing videos every Monday and Thursday, so if you guys can drop a like on this video and hit that sub button, it would mean a lot to the family and I. So we now got these fish right behind the boat. You guys can see that shine right there. And these were actually 2 fish, and as I told you guys in the beginning of this video, this barjack's lure, you could catch 3 fish at once. And on this time, we actually caught 2 tuna at the same time, which is really, really cool. So I got ready to just bail these fish over because they weren't giant fish, but it's always cool to catch 2 at one time. So the first fish here was a skipjack tuna, so I bailed this one over, and the second one was a nice blackfin tuna. Now that we got this beautiful blackfin tuna and skipjack tuna, we knew we had to continue to chase down these schools of tuna. So we reset our spread, and that's when we got another nice hit. So I now start fighting this fish, and like I told you guys before, when you're trolling these massive schools of fish, it's constant action. We didn't even have our lure in for 2 minutes, and we are now tight to another fish. And these fish were all caught on our barjack's lure, that lure I showed you guys in the beginning of this video with the 3 different hooks. So if you guys are interested in this lure, check out our description down below. The link for these lures will be there. So now I fought this fish for a good 10 minutes, and the reason why these fish take so long to reel it in, I told you guys this in the beginning, we have the line so far out because a lot of these smaller tunas, mahi, they're scared to swim into that whitewash. So usually we drop our lures so far behind the boat that none of these fish are scared, and it's just constant action. And on this day we were out fishing with the fam, so everyone was able to get into this awesome bite. But during this summertime in South Florida, usually this is the time you make those far runs offshore just because the bite near shore is not that good due to the weather being so warm. So usually that 100 to 300 foot depth is just not as good during the summertime as it is in the wintertime. Come the wintertime, you guys will notice most of our fishing is all in that 100 to 300 foot depth because the water is cooler, the wahoo. A lot of these fish start pushing through during that winter time. So you guys will notice right here, my brother and I were a little overlapped. Our lines were a little knotted here. Luckily, we were able to get out of this knot But when you're offshore trolling like this happens a lot of times, because usually when you're chasing these schools of fish, you got to turn a lot, and usually turning causes the knots. So you got to deal with the little knots here. But we saw this fish now right behind the boat, and this fish looked like a single fish. This time it was not a double. So my dad started to angle the boat just so we wouldn't knot again here. And like I told you guys before, we try not to gaff any of these smaller fish, because really it's unnecessary and you don't want to lose any of that meat. So our main goal here is just to angle the boat where it's a nice easy bail over, so we don't lose any of the meat and we're able to successfully land this fish. We now got this fish to the left side of the boat, the side we wanted to bail it over. And as you guys can see, it looked like another small blackfin tuna here. So I was able to just bail this fish over and get this beautiful blackfin tuna. We hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys in the next Barjacks Family Fishing video.